All right, so I want to talk about this next part. So we talked about what is disciple making. We've talked about are we loving the way that Jesus loves? What does disciple making relationship look like? What are some of the myths we're saved from and saved for? But here's the real question that I think we got to wrestle with. This question right here. Do I really have time? Do you ever wrestle with that? Do I really have time? And how many of you who's heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer? All right, so this will land pretty well. Christianity without discipleship is always Christianity without Christ. Just for what it's worth, let it sit there, let it burn. Let's continue on. So, I'll be honest, when I read all that stuff and how Jesus lived and how he went through and how he spent all his time, I honestly ask this question because I look at my work calendar, I look at my family calendar. If you don't have one as your marriage, it'll save a lot of arguments. So if you don't have that, go ahead and start that after this. Family calendar, put it on there. But this is the issue. I say, it's on there. She goes, no, it's not. And then I try to add it real quick, but it notifies her. Dang it. Come on. Guys, then commence the screenshot picture that gets sent to me. Brennan added an event. Okay, moving on. See, some might hear me and only think this sounds like more work, like I have to take care of my family. True, right? I have to work. True. I already serve in church. True, right? I don't have any time left. I got Stranger Things 3 to binge watch. I don't have time. Like, you know what I'm saying? Okay, maybe not. But I want to mention something, Dustin. In Matthew 28:19, it says, go and make disciples. Josh added, I'm giving credit to Josh, there's a Greek word which I'm not even attempt to pronounce. It sounds like prosciutto, but it's not prosciutto. But this is what it means, is to pursue on the journey on which we have already entered. So this whole idea of when Jesus says, go and make disciples, it's not like stop what you're doing and go over here to make disciples. It means to go in the current context you're sitting in. It means to go with this heart and this zeal that where I am at is where I can make disciples. Where I am at is where I can make disciples. The number one thing is like, where's God going to send me? I go, he's already sent you right where you're at. In your family, with your husband, with your wife, with your kids, with your co-workers, with the business you run, with the boss that you have, with the church family you're with. Like, God has already sent you. Where's God sending you? The thing is, he already has. And I think if we're thinking God is going to someday send us, then we're going to miss where he's working now. He has already sent you with where you're at. And if we're convinced that we will only do what we think we must do, we have to ask this question: is it worth being inconvenienced for discipleship? See, and if we already begin to compartmentalize our lives, we may have already missed the point of being a disciple maker. If we have this time, this is when I make disciples, and this is when I do my normal life, and this is when I do church things, and this is when I do my work. Like if we separate our life and compartmentalize, and that our mind already goes there, my question is we may have already missed the point. I mean, Titanic, right? 1912. Too soon. Perfect. It was considered to be the unsinkable ship. Whoops. Right? And the idea behind it was this. The idea behind it was this, is that we can create these compartments, and if we hit something or we take on water, we'll seal that part up, and then what will happen is we can just kind of limp back to port or whatever. But it's actually this idea that I can take on a little bit and still be okay is what actually caused the Titanic to go this way and to break in half, killing more people. It's this whole idea that we can compartmentalize and still be okay is actually very destructive in our effectiveness in making disciples. It's this idea that I can disciple over here, but not over here, that this is my responsibilities and this is not. When Jesus is trying to break down all that mold and all that wall, says, wherever you are at, that is where you're sent. That is changing this mindset. It's changing our heart to not compartmentalize our lives, but to say, Jesus, you can work in all of our lives. And so something that I don't believe we mentioned, but we're going to have some time for Q&A at the end. If you're like, Brennan, how does this look and lived out in this way or in this way? We're going to have some people we'll put on the spotlight that you can ask. So if you have any questions, make sure to write them down and we'll get to them at the end. C.S. Lewis. Who loves C.S. Lewis? So good. If you didn't raise your hand, we will pray for you after. Just kidding, kind of. Decisions change who we are. I love this C.S. Lewis quote. It says, I would say that every time you make a choice, you are turning the central part of you, the part that you that chooses into something a little different than it was before. We make a decision when we make this power to choose what Jesus is doing. We're taking the depth of who we are and we're changing it a little bit to become more and more like Christ. So you refer back to Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God, and everything that you need will be added to you in his righteousness. What priorities are out of alignment with seeking God's kingdom first? You see, with being a disciple maker, it's not necessarily doing more, but what do we need to do with what we're currently given? We can take this conversation, be like, we need to be disciple makers, and that's how the world will be reached. Like, there's no room in my calendar anymore. That's not the point. I just want to make sure we hear that. The point is not schedule out time for disciple making. It's integrate disciple making in the time you already have. And if we continue to think that these things are separate, we're going to miss the full life that he has for us. We're going to miss all that he has for us in every bit of way. And so, see, Jesus wants to transform us from the inside out to impact every area of our lives, our marriage, our family, our friends, our work, school, wherever you're at. But this is the thing. He's not calling us to more to do. He's calling us to be more where we're at. Does that make sense? He's not being like, okay, Brennan, add all these 17 things and these pathways and these conversations and this and that, and like add all these things to your life. You say, no, Brennan, in the context you are in, be intentional. Brennan, in the context that you're in, be aware. In the context that you're in, look for where I'm at work. In the context that you're in with the customers you interact with, the clients you have, with the people that you're working with, be aware because God is at work. And I think we love to overcomplicate things. What I love about Jesus is extremely simple. It's extremely simple. He's calling us to be present with where the Spirit is at work where we currently are. The Spirit of God is at work in your kids' lives. The Spirit of God is at work in your spouse. I promise you. The Spirit of God is at work in your coworkers. He can make his appeal through you to the people around you. So it's being aware. See, becoming a disciple maker is not so much what do I have to do now, but it's more what is the state of the heart what's the state my heart needs to be in. Does that make sense? So wanting to really transform our hearts and to be aware of what God is doing. If you are a practical person who's like, give me 4 steps and I'll be good. Does anybody kind of operate like that? No shame, no shame. I was going to call him out if she didn't raise her hand. I know her. You may ask this question, though. What does a disciple-making relationship look like? This may seem obvious, but it's important. Disciple-making relationship is a relationship. That's worth the price of admission, so it's free. So, not simply information transfer. People, this is from this book called The Great Omission by Dallas Willard. It says, people we talk with will not recall 99% of what we say to them, but they will never forget the kind of person that you are. Did you ever meet someone who says, I don't know what they said, but I just don't like them? Or maybe the other way. Are you pointing at me, Dustin? He's like, yeah. No, but it's the other way around. Like, man, I don't know what that person said, but I just like being around them. And the intangible, what we communicate, we're all communicating at some level intangibly. But the question is, what is coming out of you? What is it? Because there's a pastor that says it this way: whatever you're doing may be private, may be secret, but it's never private. Meaning whatever you're doing in your secret life, good or bad, in between, people may not know what's happening, but they can definitely tell something's either going well or not. You ever see somebody like, hey, how are you doing? They're like, good. I'm like, I don't believe you, but that's cool, man. Or you're like, hey, how are you doing? Like, so good. Like, I actually believe you. There's this discernment that the Spirit gives us when we're around people to say, man, where are people at? And what we communicate, majority of it is nonverbal. Mark 1:16-20 says this. It's the same account, but Mark's writing, and he says, one day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, come and follow me, and I'll show you how to fish for people. And they left their nets at once and followed him. And a little further up the shore, Jesus saw Zebedee's sons, James and John, in a boat repairing their nets. And he called at once, and they also followed him, leaving their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men. So from this, I want to break down, I noticed, so the people that love like steps, you're going to love this. Here's the 4 things I see from this passage. The 4 things, disciple making. Very first thing we see is an invitation. If you want to make a disciple, there has to be some sort of invitation to be in relationship with. I love when people go, I think it was Richie, because it sounds like a Richie thing to say. He goes, hey, Brandon, who are you discipling? And I list off some people. He goes, would they know that you're discipling them? Like if I asked them, it would be the same thing. I'm like, come on, man. I know you're my brother-in-law, but chill. But invitation. There has to be a clear, like, hey, would you love to get together and walk through this together and like grow in our relationship with Christ? Would you like to be a part of this with me? This is a big piece, willingness. If you are trying to strong arm someone in disciple making, it ain't gonna happen. You are a hot mess and you need to be in this relationship with me right now so you can get your life together. That's not gonna work. Guarantee it. But there has to be this willingness on both ends, because disciple making is a sacrifice. It's not based on convenience, it's based on conviction. So it's being in relationship with someone. It's going to take a willingness to be in relationship. It's going to take a willingness to be vulnerable. It's going to take a willingness to be in disciple-making relationship. The second piece is kind of what I hit on, is it's a two-way commitment. Do the people you're discipling know that you're discipling them? Or you're like, Brent, I'm going like the incognito route. We're just hanging out, but I'm really discipling them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, do you guys know that, like, man, when we're together and there's these times, like, we're gonna grow, we're gonna talk. How's life going? How's your marriage doing? Like, how are your kids? Like, what's going on in your heart? Like, is there a commitment? Say, hey, we're gonna be in this relationship together. And the last piece is probably the biggest one. It's value. There has to be a value on it. Speaking of one of the guys I meet with regularly, and it was one of those parts that kind of stung, you know, like, anyways, I'll just tell you the story. We've been meeting together for a long time, and we met at a certain, like, midday on Thursday, and, man, things get crazy, like, their meetings get moved, last-minute meetings. I'm like, I kept having to cancel on them, and he simply said this to me, I know we're supposed to be, like, in this discipleship relationship, but it doesn't seem like you value our time together. Way to go, Pastor Brennan. Like, come on. You know, like, and that, I will never forget that moment. Because I was like, oh. Because good intentions don't really matter if my actions don't line up. Oh, well, I meant to beat up, or I really wanted to, but you haven't. You know what I'm saying? And for me, I think I felt so convicted by this. I'm like, wow. And I just felt so excited, though, for this reason, because there was so much value in the relationship that wasn't allow Brennan's absent-mindedness to break that relationship, that he called that out of me. There's this two-way commitment in this relationship for him to be able to call that out of me as well. But there has to be a value on what you're doing. Have you ever met up with somebody like, I don't know why we're sitting here talking to each other? Have you ever felt that? Somebody like, right now. I'm just kidding. Get out. But it's super easy to be like, man, like, is this valuable? Does the person know that you value them? Does the person know that you value your time together, that you're gonna block that out and make sure you spend time with them? Do they know that you value them? Because that is gonna get communicated whether we like it or not. So the question is, are we communicating the value? The last piece before we jump into Q&A, told you this one's gonna go a little quicker, is the simple call to action. What do we do with all this content? How do we move this from just intellectual to how we live? It's a simple call that in the spheres of influence you have, the current place you're living and residing now, it's a call to change your mindset. Saying, I'm going to be intentional with the people that I'm around. I'm going to go into work. I'm going to go into my home. I'm going to go into my marriage. I'm going to ask this one question. The Holy Spirit, show me where you're at work right now. It's this shift of Jesus. I want to join you at work, and I want to help make disciples of you. It's this shift in this mindset, and I'm going to be intentional in the spheres of influence. And maybe if you're in here and you're already leading at Real Life in some way, I want to call you to, if you're not in a discipleship relationship, to get in one. And so help me if I hear this. No one's asked to disciple me. You got to ask. Remember what we talked about at the beginning? When Jesus like, what do you guys want? Like, where are you staying? It's the same thing. Maybe don't lead off that way. Hey, where are you staying? Nowhere, I got to go by. Call Sean Pegram, detective. Sean. Just kidding, kind of. Man, if you aren't being discipled and you want to be in this type of relationship, I want to empower you, encourage to go ask somebody. Say, hey, I want to know what it means to grow as a disciple of Jesus. Can you help me? Can you grow with me? Can you show me how to live this out? And then if you're not discipling in your family, your coworkers, your friends, my question would be, who do you need to invite into a relationship? So it's kind of twofold. Seeing the people that are willing. Who are the people around you that you need to invite into this relationship? But also, if you're not in this type of relationship, who do you need to ask, hey, will you please disciple me? I mean, here's the thing. If they say no, don't get all bent out of shape and be like, oh, I tried, so I'm not going to try again. Try again. Try again. And try again. Have this perseverance that you being a disciple of Jesus is far greater than if someone is able to do it. Find someone who's able to walk through life with you.